you don't sell green. But if you sell better economics, better resilience, better efficiency, et cetera, in energy systems, food systems, agricultural supply chains, whatnot, then that's something that's sustainable as a business model, as a technology, and then it will also create impact at the end of the day. And because people have focused so much on that for the past 2, 3, 4 years, we see better situations, better companies, more interesting cases. My name is Nils. I'm a partner at Capnamic. Capnamic is an early stage specialist VC firm from Germany. We've been around for almost 15 years, investing from our fourth fund. We come in early, typically as a lead or co-lead investor. Take quite a bit of ownership, but stay very close to you at the same time. We focus on Europe, especially German-speaking areas, but we've been investing a little bit beyond as well, opportunistically. What about myself? I'm an ex-operator. So I understand what founders are going through. I'm also an ex-advisor. So I started off at McKinsey and then realized that actually I want to become an entrepreneur one day. So I started doing that. Been working in consumer and e-commerce on one hand, and then VC and tech on the other end. And then slowly but steadily moved towards becoming full-time venture capital investor. And now I'm super happy to be part of this great partnership.
Amazing. Well, so happy to have you guys and excited to discuss your thesis around AgriFood. Just check size. And what percentage ownership do you guys usually look to take?
Yeah. Okay. So typically we probably do 2 to 3 million initially. We can do from $500,000 when it's super early up to 5 or 6 initially in a rather Series A-like situation. We love 15% ish. Yeah, of course, if it's a little later in the round, then we can find ways there. The earlier it is, the more we like. We find that helpful because of our portfolio math. Yeah. At the end of the day, we need to return money to somebody, to our LPs, and we want to do that across fund generations. But at the same time, we only invest into 4 or 5, maybe 6 companies a year, so very selectively, and we try to be very much on their side. At the end of the day, I mean, all VCs tell you the same stuff. The value proposition of almost all VCs is the same. The question is who delivers. And my partners at this firm have been around for so long that we've been actually fortunate enough to help founders build unicorns and sell them to large, very, very large enterprises. And we are about to build the next few unicorns with our portfolio founders. And that's only possible because we focus on a few and then we stay very close to them.
Amazing. Well, congrats on that. And talk through the recent investment in AgriFood and kind of where your thesis, what's driving that investment?
Probably there's 2 recent investments that fall into this space. One is Omega from Munich. The other is Logistikbude, which will at some stage be renamed into an internationally usable name, from Dortmund, which is actually my hometown. Both are great examples. With Omega, they solve a massive real world problem in hatcheries through AI-enabled spectral analysis. So basically, they tell you at day 5 or 6, don't quote me exactly, whether it's male or female, the egg that's being produced in the hatchery, and that's a massive problem for ethnic, ecological, but also especially economic reasons. And we like this team because it's super experienced. Actually, 2 of the 3 founders have been part of the whole ProGlove story. I think sold it. Don't quote me, a few €100 million. It's a great team in terms of personalities. They work at the intersection of hardware and software. They solve a huge but rather unsexy problem, something we like as well. So that's great. And this is, totally on point food tech. Then Logistikbude.
Can we open this one up for a second? Because I think it's just, I'll just do a little reveal here. I was consulting for a company in the past few years ago who was a competitor to Omega.
Which one was it?
It was, I can't remember. I'll tell you. I'll make it very easy. It's an Israeli-based company that if you look at the competitor to Omega, Israeli company, they were no longer around. So Omega beat them. So congratulations. But the question becomes just, first of all, I think it's really fascinating for our listeners to understand the problem, because maybe you could just help explain why is knowing the sex of the egg so crucial in commercial hatcheries? Why is that so? Why don't you want a man? As some cultures prefer men. Why don't hatcheries prefer a man?
Yeah. I mean, let me tell you a little bit about it. I mean, my partner Christian and our colleague Jason, they'd be the best ones because they are doing the deal. They're leading our investment. They're the best ones to talk to. But there's a problem in so far that male chicken neither produce meat nor eggs. So from an economic perspective in agriculture, there's no real value to them. And in the past, there has been, that huge issue of actual, not entirely sure how to put this in English, but in German we'd say Kükenschreddern. So you actually just, destroying the little chickens, putting them into a huge machine where they're being, crushed into pieces. But that's getting less and less regulatory or ethically being appreciated or executed across European, but also Northern American markets. Now, so both for, from a consumer and consumer taste, ethic reasons, and regulatory perspective, as well as economic perspective, it's not desirable to actually have male chickens. So the earlier you know what is female, what is male, you can actually then abstain from further conducting the process of the egg becoming a full-blown chicken. And there's actually put, additional revenue streams. And I'm not entirely sure whether I can, make that transparent. So I won't, because it's on the founders to tell the story themselves. But there's additional revenue streams that you can open up if you know early enough which one is male. You can do something else with the male sort of egg, and then you can also let the female egg continue the journey into a chicken, and then being, something from an agricultural and economic perspective, something productive. Does it answer the question, Alex?
Yeah, and so to our listeners, what I'm hearing is clearly a deep tech solution is a large problem, right? And I would almost say it's maybe crude terms, but obviously there's an ethical piece here, but also almost like an upcycling component here of where you're taking discarded elements and then creating value from it. So by knowing early which is a discarded element, you can create greater value for the producer and reduce costs, right? So that's it's really interesting technology, and congratulations on that.
Well, congrats to Katharina, Till, and Paul, who are the founders, and that's that's super important. Not only does there need to be sort of a huge market, a problem that needs to be solved, and a solution, product, technology, whatnot, but most importantly, obviously, are the founders that we invest in.
Yeah.
And I have a second example for you, and if you want to, then we can move away from that and then towards sort of what our thesis behind that. But the second investment is called defensible. It's a supply chain software, so it's a vertical SaaS case at the end of the day. And again, very interesting founders. All four of them are former researchers at Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer is that large German research institution, and the Fraunhofer Institute for Logistics is the largest logistics think tank in the world. 700 researchers, and the team, Philip and the three of them, they are former Fraunhofer people, and they know the space. They know the problem. What they do is basically they digitize the whole load carrier management workflows. Again, very unsexy, but every day millions of load carriers are being pushed from one place to the other. For example, pallets, and in food and agricultural supply chains, that's an important thing. So it's something that we call enabling technology. Nagel Group is Europe's largest food logistics player, and they are again also one of the largest, if not the largest, customer at Logistikbude. And what we like here is that the team, they really know their shit. We love teams that either come from industry and or research, and that have a very deep domain expertise, and that work on things that need to be solved, but don't look, at first sight, look a little unsexy, a little boring even. Those are the things that we really like. And here, there's a whole discussion about AI and software, and we've been thinking about that discussion for many years. We've moved away from former investment thesis that many of our colleagues have shared for many years, a few years ago already. But if you look at vertical and infrastructure questions in software, those we still find selectively interesting. Yeah. And if you want to take a bigger picture, why do we find things in food and agricultural tech interesting? Because sort of resource scarcity and demographic shifts are sort of two of the 4 or 5 mega sort of trends that we look at for the next 10 or 15 years, where we invest in. And we love things that strengthen European resilience and autonomy. And again, if we find solutions that are in food and ag tech, that's part of a resilience game for Europe.
And again, to drive back another point, I actually think that logistics are extremely sexy because I sold very high-end software for logistics. Last mile logistics software, that's what I sold. So So to me, actually, logistics is very important. And 3PLs are very, very important.
Yeah.
First mile, middle mile, last mile. It's like
Yeah.
that we could talk days just about first
Yeah.
mile and the importance of first
Yeah.
mile.
Yeah.
Well, the question I'm curious about is, like, when I think about SaaS, like there's a lot of predictions right now that SaaS is
Mhm.
dead, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the concerns, like that. Okay, you have it's become democratized. The cost of producing it is the barrier to entry is much lower. Another thing is the fear that bigger players are going to just disrupt it themselves and just a good example right now is Whisper, which is this voice to text.
Yeah.
Was valued at X billions of dollars. Google puts out one feature on their keyboard that does voice to text.
Yeah.
That's a big threat. So curious, how do you guys look at SaaS, especially in why specifically in the agri-food tech vertical or in this first mile vertical, SaaS still makes sense when you have a
Yeah.
world of AI which is threatening it so hard?
I speak with founders raising every day, and they're all telling me the same thing. It's harder than ever to find investors who are actually deploying, and getting access to those leads takes time founders just don't have. Every month fundraising is a month burning runway. This is why we created FTW Plus, a community of founders actively fundraising. The world's most accurate agri-food tech investor database, plus connecting you directly to ideal target investors and a community of support and accountability. Guaranteed results or your money back. Apply today at www.joinftw.com/hub.
Yeah. So I think as an sort of opener, we need to sort of reiterate we are very selective and careful with software investments. For many years, we've done things at the intersection of software and hardware, buy and build models. So moving away from pure or oftentimes pure software investments. But we still believe there's value being created in software. And if you want to make it super simple, we believe horizontal is more difficult than vertical. And why is that? Because in horizontal software, often we talk about public data. We talk about situations where you can use some of the established models, products out there, whatever Google or OpenAI, whatever Anthropic are putting out to actually work on things. But in situations where you talk about sort of niche segments, for instance, parts of our food and ag tech space, or let's say food and agricultural space, and there you find sort of situations with very specific workflows where you have to know the industry, where situations where you have to have sort of proprietary access to the industry, where you are over time collecting and enriching proprietary data that is not publicly out there. And so we believe, and then again, and there is a difference between sort of, building a software product and actually running and operating it. Yeah? Many products also benefit from being used at multiple customers and multiple users and being run by sort of professional firms behind them. So even if, of course, you can build dummies and prototypes and things very easily nowadays, actually operating software is a whole different game and maintaining it over time. So we believe that vertical solutions still deem our attention and even horizontal situations might, but there we are a little more careful. In vertical situations like with Logistikbude, we find that those workflow integrations, those data moats that are developing over time, those proprietary access situations to customers and users in the industry are very interesting to look at. And then the third sort of part of the whole software game is obviously infrastructure. And we're seeing a lot of stuff happening beyond LLMs now in the sort of numeric space, in the whole question of physical layers that are on edge devices. And there's quite a bit of stuff happening in Europe that will be needed out in the field, out on the farm. So, there's still stuff to be done, and we don't believe that everything will be delivered by Anthropic and the likes. And that is also being driven by users, companies, if you want, societies, growing awareness that the dependency on 2 or 3 giant players might be risky. Even at least for technical reasons, not discussing any other factors in there.
Yeah, give us drive this home. My father-in-law is a lawyer, and I think like Harvey, that's a big one. I think that's a really great use case for an AI. Like that's all the cases are public. Like there's no proprietary data. Like the cases are being built on public records, right? So that's a great use case to replace. But what you're describing, and these are closed systems, they're not comfortable sharing publicly the data. You need a software solution that can integrate directly for your use case, and not necessarily, and it can be fed on public information. So again, vertical closed systems is an interesting use case.
Yeah. Fully underwrite what you're saying. I mean, I had a call yesterday with an entrepreneur from a small cap company. They do sort of gardening and stuff like that. In German, we would say Garten- und Landschaftsbau. And he says he's on purpose using only local models with sort of on-prem hosting, and he's not sharing any of his proprietary data sort of with US solutions. He's really careful about what data he is sharing from his enterprise systems with what applications out there. So anything where we see that sort of, proprietary data, deep work for integration, distribution and trust in the industry are important, potentially a connection to the physical world. And even, sort of that system of record situation, like with logistic for the load carrier question, those things we find interesting in software. And we often find them rather in vertical than in horizontal situations, and we might see them in infrastructure questions.
So take us to the next step, which is where you look at now. What's interesting? If somebody's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, hey, should I give a call? I'm based in Germany, or say German speaking regions, or maybe I'm in Europe. Like, should I be reaching out? What kind of entrepreneur should be reaching out? I mean, where are the areas that you guys are looking at? Where's the thought process of where the gaps are?
Yeah. So, at the highest level, so to say, we find situations interesting where deep technology meets sort of structural pressure, as discussed. Anything around, problems that try to solve demographic shifts and resource scarcity, labor shortages, climate volatility, pressure on food systems, and rather increasingly fragile supply chains, anything that strengthens European resilience, those we find sort of multi-decade themes. We like technologies that are part of the enabling stack, like Logistikbude, or are spot on solving individual problems in the, let's say, food space, like with Omega. We find AI is a massive accelerant, but only if it's part of a sort of bigger solution that has real world application, potentially a connection to the physical world. We love that. We don't invest just, in AI for the sake of AI or so. Anything that becomes part of operational infrastructure is interesting. And again, it comes down, at the end of the day, it comes down to the founders. Do we see obsession? Do we see domain expertise? And then, customer pull, velocity, sort of on the market side. And those situations we love.
Okay, amazing. And just a very random question, but do you consider the UK part of Europe?
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually we have a portfolio company that's called Dextery. They do sort of AI and robotic enabled warehouse inventory automation. It's on the retail side and logistics side of things, again, based in London.
Okay, perfect. So I think that gives us a really amazing overview of the strategy. Is there anything else that you think for the founders that they need to hear? And maybe actually, I think a lot of the founders that I speak to, they're not but cynical, but we've been in this winter with food for a little while, right? I actually think this is actually the best time for us because everything's so cheap.
Yeah.
And this is the best time to actually build a company in our space. But what gives you optimism around investing in solutions around AgriFood? Like, why are you optimistic around there being an opportunity as a VC there for you today?
Yeah. Well, one is the questions are still looming. Even if you sort of concede that the whole macro and geopolitical climate for impact business models has been rather weak for the past 2 or 3 years, that might still, continue to be the case. Climate change is real. Resource scarcity is real. Shifting and changing demographics is real, and those problems won't go away. So we need to solve, for example, for warmer climates, for the different dispersion of rain seasons over the year. And, and all those problems that we don't only have in the Middle East or, in Southern Europe, but that are actually moving north sort of as we speak. That's number one. So those structural problems won't go away and need to be solved. And by the way, if you solve them, I'm not talking about the economic reality. Also, sort of from a purpose perspective, that's huge. Yeah, there's so much impact to be created. And number two is because of that sort of crisis situation that you have been describing and that we've seen for the past few years on anything around climate tech, impact investing, etc. Founders and investors have focused on actually improving economics, resilience, efficiency, moving away from the whole we need a green premium for this to work thesis. And that's healthy. Crises do bear something positive at the end of the day. As you said, Alex, I fully subscribe to that. And so we believe, you don't sell green. That doesn't work. But if you sell better economics, better resilience, better efficiency, et cetera, in energy systems, food systems, agricultural supply chains, whatnot, then that's something that's sustainable as a business model, as a technology, and then it will also create impact at the end of the day. And because people have focused so much on that for the past 2, 3, 4 years, we see better situations, better companies, more interesting cases.
Amazing. And I share in that principle entirely. The type of entrepreneurs that I see, they've learned from the mistakes and the challenges of the last 5 years. So you get the benefits of other people's mistakes that you've learned on top of. And also the valuations. You could do quite well with a $500 million exit, actually. And if the money structure is right, people could do well. Like you could still get great returns with smaller exits because things are cheap. Founders are more flexible than they were in 2021. So I really appreciate your insights, Nils. This is a really great conversation. And the companies you've invested in, they seem like they're true winners. I can definitely tell you, Omega, I follow that company very closely. And I'm very happy to see that they're succeeding and growing.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. That's very kind. It's very kind.
Amazing. One more thing, don't close this episode yet. If you got value from this conversation, here's what I need from you. A 5-star rating, 1 comment, 20 seconds of your time. That's the deal. A 5-star rating means more founders find this content, and every time a founder raises, all boats are elevated. Every week, I pick one random comment and send that person a complimentary copy of Investment Climate, the book. 50 sales playbooks from founders who actually raise money during the fundraising winter. Real strategies, real closes, real numbers, not theory. So if you want a copy, comment below. And if you haven't followed the show yet, do that too. And if there's a guest you want us to bring on the show, just drop us a note or send us an email. We'll read each and every one. Until then, keep on raising.